pianist actually as well. But Jill, even more so than Orange is the New Black, has now created a show which, although the lead trans character is not played by a trans person, the show is packed with trans actors, the crew is packed with trans technicians and workers, and the writing room has a brilliant artist, trans woman on the team. And that's really an evolution for Hollywood. There's really not been anything that has that much. And the show is getting all kinds of award nominations and everything. And just like when Jared Leto got the Oscar for Rayon, when Felicity Huffman was nominated for an Oscar for her role, when Lee Pace was nominated for a Golden Globe for his role, Hollywood's ears perk up and they see money floating in the air, and unfortunately that's all it is they just want to buy that mansion and that boat and that mistress, and that's all they want. And they see the money that these trans stories are generating and the awards and the prestige, and they're going to write more of them, and they're going to bring in these trans actors because they see the good press it gets. And those aren't necessarily the reasons I wish they would do it, but whatever the reasons are, as long as they bring us to the table, let us participate in our stories and portrayals. Because originally trans people in film and the arts were always prostitutes, punchlines, or psycho killers. We call that the 3 Ps. And then later, poor things. You know, it's a lot of minority in film progresses from, you know, the exotic becomes erotic, so minorities play sex objects and hookers and things like that. Then they go to the punchline to a joke, you know, and they just make them laugh. And then they go to psycho killers like in Silence of the Lambs and Dressed to Kill, starring Michael Caine, and movies like that. And then finally they get to what you're going to see with Soldier's Girl, and that's the poor thing story. And but I think once arts start portraying the tragedy in characters, that means they're starting to see them as human beings that they empathize with. So although it's not the end point that we, you know, want, we don't always want to be tragic figures who die at the end or have someone die. It is a breaking point where you see that they are starting to view us with human empathy, I believe. And after Soldier's Girl, which was made about 10 years ago, you started seeing films like Transamerica and more human portrayals, and hopefully it's just going to keep going. So fingers crossed. But there's always going to be the awful stuff too, because Hollywood is Hollywood, and that's just going to happen.
Do you have any more films on the planning board at all?
For me personally, I've been working on a lot of music this year. There's an amazing musician named Patrick Wolf, who's kind of like a male Kate Bush meets Tori Amos. I don't know if those names ring a bell, but he plays a lot of acoustic instruments that I play. He's a brilliant singer-songwriter, and he's producing my first acoustic album. And I do a lot of cabaret and pop songs in the clubs, but my heart is really with the music I grew up with on the fiddle and the harp and the dulcimer. So he's producing that for me, and then I hope to tour with him throughout Europe, and maybe I'll get to come back to Australia too. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jim Lowe. Which is a small NGO working for the rights of older LGBTI people. I'm interested to know in America how the aged care sector is handling transgender clients. Do you know that? Jen, into the area, have you got good stories coming out yet?
In LA in particular, there is an organization that is focused on elder care for LGBT and et cetera community. They actually hold a big fancy garden party every year and raise money. And then there's a facility for which there's a great deal of competition that you get to live at, but then they also just focus on elder care and access to health care and legal rights. Because a lot of times as a gay couple gets older, a lesbian couple gets older, if one slips into dementia, you know, their partner may not have the legal rights to keep the house or to determine medical interventions, etc. And with those issues that are unique, especially to the elderly, this organization is working on that. I wish I could remember the name of it, but I've only worked with them twice in the last 12 years, so I'd have to look it up. But there is work being done, thankfully. The trans in particular, though, I'm not sure of anything specific. It's just sort of all rolled into the bigger org.
In the training we're doing, it's interesting that the staff who come, they come and go, oh yeah, we get gay, lesbian, but tell us everything about trans. They would talk all day. So it's quite interesting. It's certainly interesting to you.
Yes, yes. I suppose medical staff who aren't trained to be sensitive to gender presentation and gender identity stuff, that would be valuable training.
Is it the caregivers rather than medically trained? So.
Yeah. Yeah, I gave a presentation at the VA hospital, which is the Veterans Hospital in Los Angeles, and most of the people who come in for care are much older because we have veterans from the Vietnam era, you know, going back the Korean War and things like that. So I did give a presentation on healthcare issues for trans people that touched on some elder aspects, but mostly it was terminology and shame around transition medications, so that doctors and nurses needed to push a little more to make sure they would find out what medical interventions the patient was doing so that there wouldn't be conflicts with the prescribed medicines and stuff. It's a huge topic. I'm glad somebody's taking it on out here. I know in the U.S., Kristen Beck, who was once a Navy SEAL, which is among the most demanding physical training that U.S. fighters can go through. She was once a Navy SEAL, and then she transitioned, and she's done a lot of speaking, especially to opening up the military to the idea of trans people serving on active duty. And whenever I speak at the Lavender Law Conference as well, there are several retired generals, admirals, who are now lawyers who come to speak to that, and we've spoken to C-SPAN, which is a sort of political and governmental commentary television network. So I've met with groups of those people in that focus area, but I did not know about this specific one. I was only in for 4 years, so I'm not really a heavy hitter on military issues. They were just eventful 4 years for me.